I sat in my car outside Global Tech Industries headquarters, hands trembling as I dialed the number for Meridian Corporation, our biggest client worth $600 million annually. The phone felt heavy against my ear as I prepared to expose the massive royalty fraud my own company had been hiding for over a year. This single call would either destroy my career forever or finally deliver the justice I deserved after HR buried my promotion and threatened my livelihood. Everything I had worked for came down to this moment of truth. My name is Terry, and 4 years ago I thought I had found my dream job at Global Tech Industries in Austin, Texas. As a senior software engineer specializing in patent analysis and intellectual property compliance, I believed I was building something meaningful. The sprawling tech campus with its glass buildings and innovative atmosphere made me feel like I was part of the future. Every morning I walked through those automatic doors with genuine excitement about the challenges ahead. My specialty was complex patent research, the kind of detailed work that most engineers found tedious. While my colleagues focused on coding new features, I dove deep into the legal foundations that protected our innovations. I could spend hours analyzing patent databases, cross-referencing claims, and ensuring our software respected existing intellectual property rights. This meticulous attention to detail had saved the company from several potential lawsuits over the years. 6 months earlier, my manager, David Walsh, had pulled me into his office for what he called a career-defining conversation. David was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of confident demeanor that made junior employees feel both intimidated and inspired. He had been with Global Tech since its startup days and carried himself like someone who understood how the industry really worked. "Terry, I've been watching your performance closely," David had said, settling back in his leather chair. "Your patent compliance work has been exceptional. The board specifically mentioned your risk assessment reports in last quarter's meeting." He paused dramatically, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We're creating a new position, lead patent specialist. It comes with a $40,000 salary increase and a substantial equity package. I want you to have it." The news had felt surreal. After years of being overlooked for promotions, finally, someone recognized my contributions. The salary bump would solve so many problems. I could move out of my cramped studio apartment, help my mother with her mounting medical bills, and maybe even start saving for the future I had always dreamed about. "There's just one thing," David had continued. "We need you to conduct a comprehensive patent compliance overhaul first. Every piece of software we've developed in the past 3 years needs to be audited. It's a massive project, but I know you're the only one with the expertise to handle it properly." I had thrown myself into that project with everything I had. 60-hour weeks became my new normal as I systematically examined every algorithm, every code library, every third-party component we used. What I discovered during those long nights in the office would change everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. Our flagship software, the platform that generated most of our revenue, contained proprietary algorithms that belonged to smaller tech companies. Not similar algorithms or inspired by concepts, but actual patented processes that we were using without permission. The violations were clear documented and potentially catastrophic from a legal standpoint. I compiled a detailed report recommending immediate action. We needed to contact the patent holders, negotiate licensing agreements, and begin paying retroactive royalties to avoid lawsuit settlements that could bankrupt the company. The math was sobering. We owed millions in back payments, but the alternative was facing hundreds of millions in damages if these violations came to light in court. 3 weeks ago, I had been called into HR for what Sandra Hoffman described as a routine performance review. Sandra was the HR director, a woman in her early 40s with sharp features and an even sharper business suit that seemed designed to intimidate. Her office was decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and success, but her demeanor suggested she viewed employees as potential problems to be managed. "Terry, I appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule." Sandra had begun, though her tone suggested anything but appreciation. "I need to discuss some changes to your role here at Global Tech." The words that followed felt like physical blows. The lead patent specialist position had been restructured due to budget constraints and shifting company priorities. Instead of the promised promotion, I would receive the standard 3% annual raise that every employee got. When I mentioned my patent compliance discoveries and their critical importance to the company's legal safety, Sandra had dismissed them with a wave of her hand. "Terry, I think you're getting a bit ahead of yourself," she had said coldly. "Patent issues are handled by our legal department and executive team. That kind of strategic thinking is frankly above your pay grade. I'd recommend focusing on the technical work you were hired to do." The meeting had ended with Sandra sliding a document across her desk for me to sign, acknowledging my understanding of the restructured role and appreciation for the standard raise. I had signed it in a daze, feeling like I was signing away my future. But the real shock came 2 days later when I was updating the company directory system as part of my regular admin tasks. There, listed under new hires in the executive section, was a name that made my blood run cold: Bradley Morrison, lead patent specialist. A quick search through our internal profiles revealed everything I needed to know. Bradley was 22 years old, fresh out of college with a computer science degree and 0 experience in patent law. His emergency contact listed Sandra Hoffman as Aunt Sandra. They had played me perfectly. For 6 months, they had used my expertise to identify exactly which patents we were violating and how much we owed. They had extracted every piece of valuable information from my research, then handed my promised position to Sandra's nephew while offering me scraps. The promotion had never been real. I had been a useful tool, nothing more. That night, I sat in my car in the company parking garage and cried until I couldn't breathe. 4 years of dedication, countless overtime hours, breakthrough discoveries that had saved them millions in legal fees, all of it had been for nothing. They had taken my work, stolen my future, and given it to someone whose only qualification was sharing DNA with the right person. The betrayal lit a fire inside me that refused to be extinguished. If Global Tech wanted to treat me like I was disposable, then maybe it was time they learned exactly what they were throwing away. I had legitimate system access for patent compliance work, and I intended to use every bit of it before they realized what I was capable of discovering. Late nights in the office became my sanctuary. While the building emptied out and security guards made their rounds, I dove deeper into our patent situation than anyone had ever gone before. What I found made my original discoveries look like minor oversights. Global Tech wasn't just using a few unauthorized algorithms. We had built an entire software ecosystem on stolen intellectual property. Small companies across the country had developed innovative solutions to complex problems, only to watch Global Tech incorporate their work without permission or payment. The pattern was systematic and deliberate. Our development team had a practice they called competitive research, which sounded innocent enough in company meetings. In reality, it meant mining patent databases for recently approved innovations, then reverse engineering those solutions into our own products. They would modify just enough details to avoid obvious copying, but the core concepts remained unchanged. The most devastating discovery involved our relationship with Meridian Corporation. Meridian was our largest client, a Fortune 500 company that paid us over $600 million annually for software solutions. Their contract specifically required that all technology we provided be either original or properly licensed. They had chosen Global Tech over larger competitors specifically because we claimed to offer innovative, legally clean solutions. Meridian had no idea they were paying premium prices for stolen technology. If they discovered the truth, their legal team would have grounds to terminate our contract immediately and demand full refunds for services based on fraudulent claims. The financial impact would destroy global tech within months. We simply didn't have the cash reserves to survive losing our biggest client while simultaneously paying hundreds of millions in patent violation settlements. My personal situation was deteriorating rapidly while I uncovered these corporate secrets. My landlord had surprised me with news that my building was converting to luxury condos, requiring either a massive rent increase or 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The timing couldn't have been worse, since my mother had just received devastating news about her diabetes complications. Mom's condition had worsened to the point where she needed specialized treatment that her insurance company was fighting to avoid covering. The medical bills were piling up faster than her fixed retirement income could handle, and she was too proud to ask for help until the situation became desperate. The $40,000 raise from my promotion would have covered both emergencies easily, but instead I was staring at potential homelessness while my mother suffered. I decided to approach David Walsh directly with my findings. Maybe if he understood the scope of the legal exposure we faced, he would override Sandra's decision about my promotion. The company needed someone with my expertise to navigate these dangerous waters, and surely David would see that keeping me happy was worth more than whatever nepotistic favor he owed Sandra. I knocked on David's office door on a Thursday morning, carrying a thick folder of documentation about our patent violations. He looked up from his computer with the same confident smile that had convinced me to trust him 6 months earlier. "Terry, come in. What can I do for you?" I laid out everything I had discovered. The stolen algorithms, the systematic pattern of patent violations, the potential liability that threatened our biggest client relationships. David listened patiently occasionally, nodding or asking clarifying questions about technical details. When I finished my presentation, he leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. "Terry, I appreciate your thoroughness, I really do. But you're operating under some misunderstandings about how business works at this level." "Misunderstandings?" I asked, feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. "We've been aware of these patent situations for some time now. Our legal team has reviewed everything you've mentioned, and their advice was very clear. Wait and see if anyone actually notices or cares enough to pursue legal action. Most of these small companies don't have the resources to fight a corporation our size. The few that might try will probably settle for licensing fees far below what the patents are actually worth." The casual way he dismissed the rights of smaller companies made me feel sick. "But David, what about our contract with Meridian? They specifically require clean technology. If they find out we've been deceiving them about patent compliance, they'll terminate the relationship and probably sue us for fraud." David's expression hardened. "Terry, I'm going to give you some career advice. Successful people in this industry understand that there's a difference between what lawyers put in contracts and how business actually operates. Meridian cares about results, not patent paperwork. As long as our software keeps making them money, they're not going to ask difficult questions." "But what if someone tells them about the violations?" "Well," David said slowly, his voice taking on a warning tone, "that would be incredibly short-sighted. Anyone who damaged Global Tech's relationship with our biggest client would be personally responsible for destroying hundreds of jobs and the livelihoods of everyone who works here. I can't imagine any of our employees would be that reckless or selfish." The threat was clear, even wrapped in corporate speak. I was being told to stay quiet or face consequences. But as I walked back to my cubicle, my mind was racing with new realizations about just how deep this corruption went. That afternoon, I made a discovery that changed everything. While reviewing Sandra's email authorization logs as part of my system admin duties, I found something that made my hands shake with rage. For the past 18 months, Sandra had been systematically suppressing patent violation reports from multiple engineers across different departments. I wasn't the first person to discover problems with our intellectual property practices. At least 6 other employees had filed detailed compliance concerns through proper channels. Sandra had acknowledged their reports, thanked them for their diligence, then buried every single document in a classified folder that only she could access. The pattern was clear and calculated. Sandra had been receiving quarterly bonuses for keeping the company's legal costs below budget projections. By hiding patent violations and avoiding licensing fees, she had artificially reduced our compliance expenses while putting the entire company at risk. She was literally being rewarded for covering up problems that could destroy global tech. Even worse, I found records showing that Sandra had been using these buried reports to guide our competitive research efforts. She was providing the development team with detailed information about which patents to violate next, turning compliance reports into a roadmap for corporate theft. The betrayal ran deeper than anyone imagined. This wasn't just about my stolen promotion or her nephew's unqualified hiring. Sandra had turned the HR department into an active participant in systematic intellectual property fraud, all while collecting bonuses for her effective cost management. As I sat there reading through months of suppressed reports and covered-up violations, I realized that I was facing something much larger than workplace politics or corporate nepotism. This was organized criminal activity happening at the highest levels of my company, and I was the only person in a position to expose it. But first they were going to try to destroy me. The next Monday morning brought a summons that I had been dreading but somehow expecting. Sandra's assistant called before 9 o'clock requesting my immediate presence for an urgent performance discussion. The tone in her voice suggested this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. Sandra's office felt different this time. The motivational posters about teamwork seemed to mock me from the walls, and her desk was arranged with military precision, including a thick file folder with my name printed on the tab. She gestured for me to sit in the uncomfortable chair across from her desk, the one that positioned me lower than her imposing leather chair. Terry, I've been receiving some concerning feedback about your recent behavior and attitude, Sandra began without preamble. Several colleagues have mentioned that you've been asking inappropriate questions about company policies and making employees uncomfortable with discussions about legal matters that don't concern your role. The accusations were so absurd that I almost laughed. Sandra, I haven't discussed patent issues with anyone except David, and that was specifically about my job responsibilities. Your job responsibilities, she repeated slowly, are to provide technical support for software development, not to second-guess strategic business decisions made by executives with far more experience than you have. She opened the folder and pulled out a document that made my heart sink. It was a performance improvement plan, the corporate equivalent of a death sentence. The document listed fabricated issues with my professional communication, boundary respect, and collaborative attitude. According to this official record, I had been resistant to feedback, argumentative with supervisors, and disruptive to team dynamics. This plan outlines specific behavioral expectations for the next 90 days. Sandra continued. Failure to demonstrate significant improvement in these areas will result in immediate termination for cause, which means no severance package and no unemployment benefits. The genius of her strategy was becoming clear. By putting me on a performance improvement plan, she could fire me at any time and claim it was due to legitimate job performance issues. Any attempt I made to whistleblow or expose the patent violations would be dismissed as the desperate lies of a disgruntled employee who was already on track to be terminated. I also need to inform you about some necessary security adjustments, Sandra said, sliding another document across the desk. Due to your recent questions about confidential business matters, I will be implementing restrictions on your system access. You'll only be able to access files and databases directly related to your current assignments. My administrative privileges were being revoked. The access that had allowed me to discover the full scope of Global Tech's patent violations was disappearing, cutting off my ability to gather additional evidence. They were systematically removing my tools while building a paper trail to justify destroying my credibility. The isolation campaign began immediately. By Tuesday afternoon, I noticed that conversations stopped when I approached groups of coworkers. People who had been friendly for years suddenly found excuses to avoid eating lunch with me or participating in the casual conversations that made office life bearable. Jake Rodriguez from the development team, someone I had collaborated with on dozens of projects, actually crossed the street to avoid walking with me to the parking garage. When I finally cornered him at the coffee machine, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Look, Terry, I heard you've been having some issues with management," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I like you, I really do, but I can't afford to get caught up in whatever's going on. I've got a mortgage and 2 kids in college." The message was spreading through the office grapevine associating with Terry was career suicide. Sandra had weaponized the very human tendency to avoid people who seemed to be in trouble with authority. My colleagues weren't bad people, but they had families to support and their own vulnerabilities to protect. My work assignments were quietly redistributed to other team members without explanation. Projects I had been leading for months suddenly had new coordinators who would take things from here. When I asked David about the changes, he offered vague explanations about reorganizing workflows and optimizing resource allocation. The physical manifestation of my isolation was a sudden cubicle relocation, under the pretense of optimizing office space. I was moved from the collaborative area where I had worked for 4 years to a corner section near the building maintenance storage. My new workspace was surrounded by empty cubicles, creating a perfect environment for surveillance and psychological pressure. The financial pressure that had motivated me to fight back was intensifying exponentially. The eviction notice arrived exactly 30 days after my landlord's announcement about converting the building. I had that long to find a new place to live or face legal action. In Austin's competitive rental market, finding an affordable apartment with good credit and stable employment was challenging enough. Finding one while on a performance improvement plan felt nearly impossible. My mother's medical situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted. The insurance company had denied coverage for the specialized diabetes treatment her doctors recommended, claiming it was experimental, despite its proven track record. The appeals process could take months, and her condition couldn't wait that long. She was facing a choice between bankruptcy or potentially life-threatening complications. I spent my savings account on a consultation with Marcus Fletcher, an employment attorney who specialized in wrongful termination cases. His office was in a professional building downtown, and his credentials were impressive, but his assessment of my situation was brutally realistic. "Texas is an at-will employment state," Marcus explained after reviewing my documentation. "Your employer can fire you for almost any reason, as long as it's not specifically prohibited by law. Proving retaliation for whistleblowing requires demonstrating that your firing was directly connected to protected activity, and they've built a strong case that you're being terminated for performance issues." "But the performance issues are completely fabricated," I protested. "They're retaliating against me for discovering patent violations." "I believe you," Marcus said gently. "But belief isn't the same as proof that would hold up in court. They've documented performance concerns and followed proper HR procedures. A judge would see an employee who was struggling with job performance and an employer who gave her 90 days to improve. He explained that patent violation cases were incredibly complex and expensive. Even if I had irrefutable proof of corporate wrongdoing, pursuing legal action could take years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Most importantly, I would need to survive financially while the case proceeded, which seemed impossible given my current circumstances. My advice is to document everything, avoid any confrontations that could be used against you, and start looking for other employment immediately," Marcus concluded. "I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but it's the reality of your situation." Walking back to my car after that meeting, I felt more defeated than at any point in my life. The system was rigged against employees like me, and the people with power were protected by layers of legal processes that favored corporations over individuals. I had discovered criminal activity that threatened hundreds of jobs and millions of dollars in client relationships, but I was the one facing career destruction. That night, while cleaning out my desk to remove personal items before they could be confiscated, I found something that would change the trajectory of my entire fight. Hidden in the back of my filing drawer was a backup drive I had forgotten about, containing copies of every patent violation report, client contract detail, and correspondence I had reviewed over the past 6 months. The drive contained documented proof of Sandra and David's deliberate cover-up, Bradley's complete lack of qualifications for the position they gave him, and most importantly, detailed information about exactly how much money Meridian Corporation was paying for technology that Global Tech had stolen. Everything I needed to prove corporate fraud was stored on a device the size of my thumb. But I also discovered something that made my hands shake with rage and terror. While organizing files for the backup drive, I found Sandra's termination paperwork for me already prepared and dated for the following Friday. The performance improvement plan was theater. They never intended to give me 90 days to improve. The meeting scheduled for Friday morning wasn't a progress review. It was my firing, complete with security escort to ensure I couldn't access company systems or remove any evidence. I had less than 5 days to act before losing all credibility and access. After Friday, I would be just another disgruntled former employee making unsubstantiated accusations against my previous employer. My window of opportunity was closing rapidly, and traditional legal channels had already proven inadequate. As I sat in my car in the empty parking garage holding that backup drive, I realized that I had reached the point where conventional wisdom and safe choices had failed completely. The system designed to protect employees and ensure corporate accountability had been corrupted by the very people it was supposed to regulate. Sometimes justice requires abandoning the official channels and taking direct action even when the consequences could be devastating. I had information that could save Meridian Corporation from being defrauded and protect future companies from similar violations. The question was whether I had the courage to use it. The answer would determine not just my own future, but potentially the fate of everyone involved in Global Tech's criminal conspiracy. Friday morning arrived with the sick certainty of an execution date. I woke up at 5:30, my stomach churning with anxiety about the meeting scheduled for 9 o'clock. Sandra's email had been professionally worded, but ominous. "Please join me in Conference Room B to discuss your progress under the Performance Improvement Plan and next steps for your role at Global Tech." I knew exactly what those next steps would be. The night before, I had made a desperate attempt to access my work computer one final time, hoping to download additional evidence before they cut off my access completely. Instead, I found a blank desktop and a message from IT support explaining that my workstation had been refreshed due to routine maintenance procedures. Every file, every document, every piece of evidence I had stored locally was gone. When I called the IT help desk, a technician named Brian apologized profusely, but explained that the data recovery wasn't possible. "Sometimes these routine cleanups are more aggressive than we intend," he said, though his tone suggested he was reading from a script. Unfortunately, if files weren't backed up to the server, there's really nothing we can do to retrieve them. The timing was too perfect to be accidental. They had wiped my computer the night before my termination meeting, ensuring that I would have no access to evidence and no way to prove my claims about patent violations. It was the final step in a carefully orchestrated plan to discredit and silence me. The irony was that their meticulous planning had one crucial flaw: they didn't know about the backup drive hidden in my personal belongings. My mother called while I was getting dressed for what I knew would be my last day at Global Tech. She was trying to sound upbeat, but I could hear the strain in her voice as she described her latest medical appointment. The diabetes complications were progressing faster than her doctors had anticipated, and the insurance company was still fighting the coverage denial through their appeals process. "I don't want you to worry about me, sweetheart," she said, using the same tone she had used when I was a child, and she was trying to hide how difficult things really were. "The doctors say there are other treatment options we can try while we wait for the insurance situation to resolve." But I could hear what she wasn't saying. The alternative treatments were less effective and came with significant side effects. Every day we delayed the proper care was a day her condition could worsen irreversibly. The appeals process could take months, and her health couldn't wait that long. "Mom, I'm going to figure this out," I promised, though I had no idea how. "We're going to get you the treatment you need." After ending the call, I sat in my car in the Global Tech parking garage and had what I can only describe as a complete emotional breakdown. The stress of the past weeks, the financial pressure, the systematic destruction of my career, and now my mother's deteriorating health combined into a wave of despair that left me sobbing uncontrollably. I felt utterly powerless. Every legitimate avenue I had tried had been blocked or corrupted. The legal system favored corporations with resources over individual employees with evidence. The HR processes designed to protect workers had been weaponized against me. Even my own colleagues had abandoned me to protect their own positions. For a moment, I seriously considered walking into that meeting, accepting my termination quietly, and trying to rebuild my life somewhere else. Maybe I could find another job, help my mother through whatever financial assistance programs existed, and learn to live with the knowledge that corporate criminals had won because they had more power than truth. But as I sat there wiping tears from my face, I remembered something my father had told me years before he passed away. He had been a factory worker who spent his career fighting for worker safety regulations, often facing retaliation from management for reporting dangerous conditions. "Sometimes the only choice you have," he had said, "is between being a victim and being a fighter. Either way, you're going to get hurt. But only one of those choices gives you a chance to make things better for the people who come after you." That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to walk meekly into Conference Room B and accept my termination. I wasn't going to let Sandra and David destroy my career while covering up criminal activity that threatened hundreds of jobs and millions of dollars in fraudulent billing. I had information that could prevent Meridian Corporation from being deceived and potentially save my company from legal catastrophe. The question was how to use that information effectively. I spent the next 2 hours researching Meridian Corporation's executive structure and corporate culture. Their CEO, Jennifer Martinez, had built a reputation for ethical business practices and zero tolerance for vendor fraud. She had personally overseen the termination of several major contracts when suppliers were found to be misrepresenting their capabilities or engaging in deceptive practices. Most importantly, Meridian's legal department was known for aggressive pursuit of corporate fraud cases. They had recently won a $100 million settlement against a previous vendor who had been billing them for services that violated third-party licensing agreements. The case had set a precedent for exactly the kind of situation Global Tech was creating with their stolen patent portfolio. If I could reach someone at Meridian with credible evidence of patent violations, they would have both the motivation and resources to investigate immediately. Unlike individual employees fighting corporate retaliation, Meridian had the legal standing and financial power to demand immediate accountability. At 8:45, 15 minutes before my scheduled termination meeting, I walked out of Global Tech's headquarters for what I knew might be the last time as an employee. I got in my car, drove to the parking lot of a coffee shop 2 blocks away, and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking as I dialed the main number for Meridian Corporation. When the receptionist answered, I asked to speak with someone in their legal department about an urgent matter regarding their contract with Global Tech Industries. "May I ask what this concerns?" she asked. "Patent violations affecting the software they've been providing to Meridian." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have documentation showing that Global Tech has been billing Meridian for technology that violates third-party intellectual property rights." There was a brief pause. "Please hold while I connect you with our chief legal counsel." The next few minutes would determine whether I had just saved my career or destroyed any chance I had of finding employment in the tech industry ever again. But as I waited for someone to pick up the line, I realized that I had already made peace with the consequences. Some things are more important than personal security, and sometimes the right choice is the one that terrifies you most. The phone clicked as someone picked up the line. "This is Robert Chen, Chief Legal Counsel for Meridian Corporation. I understand you have concerns about patent compliance in our Global Tech contract." "Yes," I said, taking a deep breath before continuing. "My name is Terry, and I work for Global Tech Industries as a senior software engineer specializing in patent compliance. I've discovered systematic violations of intellectual property rights in the software Global Tech has been providing to Meridian, and I believe your company is being defrauded." The conversation with Robert Chen lasted 47 minutes and changed both of our companies forever. "I need to understand exactly what you're telling me," Robert Chen said after I had outlined the scope of Global Tech's patent violations. His voice was calm but intense, like a surgeon focusing on a critical operation. "You're saying that the software platform we're paying Global Tech $600 million annually to provide contains stolen intellectual property." "That's exactly what I'm saying," I replied, grateful that my voice sounded more confident than I felt. Global Tech has been systematically using patented algorithms and processes owned by smaller tech companies without permission or licensing agreements. Your contract specifically requires that all technology be either original or properly licensed. They've been defrauding Meridian for over 18 months. I could hear typing in the background as Robert took notes. "What kind of documentation do you have to support these claims?" "Complete patent analysis reports showing exactly which algorithms are stolen and which companies own the original patents. Internal emails discussing the deliberate decision to use unlicensed technology. Financial projections showing how much money Global Tech has saved by avoiding proper licensing fees. And most importantly, documented evidence that senior management is aware of these violations and has chosen to hide them from clients like Meridian." "Ms." He paused, realizing he didn't have my full name. "Terry Johnson," I said, making a split-second decision to provide my real identity. There was no point in hiding anymore. "Ms. Johnson, these are extremely serious allegations. If what you're telling me is accurate, Meridian Corporation has been paying premium prices for fraudulent services. I need to escalate this immediately to our CEO and board of directors." "Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something," I said urgently. "I'm scheduled to be fired from Global Tech in about 20 minutes. They've put me on a fabricated performance improvement plan as retaliation for discovering these patent violations. Once I'm terminated, they'll try to discredit anything I say as the lies of a disgruntled former employee." Robert's tone sharpened. "Are you saying they're retaliating against you for whistleblowing about these violations?" "Exactly. My manager and the HR director have been systematically suppressing patent compliance reports and covering up violations to avoid licensing costs. They've already wiped my computer and restricted my system access to prevent me from gathering additional evidence. Ms. Johnson, I'm going to ask you to hold while I conference in our CEO, Jennifer Martinez. This conversation needs to happen at the highest level immediately. While I waited on hold, I watched the clock in my car dashboard count down the minutes until my scheduled termination meeting. Sandra was probably already in conference room B, reviewing my termination paperwork and preparing her exit speech about how my attitude problems had made my dismissal inevitable. Ms. Johnson, this is Jennifer Martinez, a crisp, authoritative voice said as the call reconnected. Robert has briefed me on your allegations. I need to understand the timeline here. How long has this patent violation situation been going on? At least 18 months, possibly longer, I replied. I only discovered it 6 months ago when I was conducting a comprehensive compliance audit. But based on the patterns I found, Global Tech has been using stolen intellectual property as a business strategy for years. And you reported this internally. Yes, I provided detailed documentation to my manager and HR director. They told me to stay quiet about it and threatened my job when I pressed for action. Instead of addressing the violations, they've been using my reports to guide their selection of which patents to steal next. Jennifer's voice turned ice cold. Mr. Chen, I want our entire legal team activated immediately. Cancel my afternoon meetings. I want a forensic audit of every piece of software Global Tech has provided us, and I want it started today. If we're being defrauded, I want to know the full extent immediately. Understood, Robert replied. Ms. Johnson, we're going to need you to provide all the documentation you mentioned. Can you email everything to our legal department today? Yes, I have copies of everything on a secure backup drive. But I need you to understand something. Global Tech's legal team is going to claim that I'm a disgruntled employee making false accusations. They've been very careful to build a paper trail that makes me look like a problem employee. Let me worry about our legal strategy, Jennifer said firmly. If Global Tech has been defrauding us, their credibility is going to be the least of their concerns. We'll have teams of forensic accountants and intellectual property lawyers examining every line of code they've provided. Employee credibility won't matter when we have independent verification of patent violations. The call ended with specific instructions for sending documentation and contact information for Meridian's legal team. As I hung up, I realized that I had just triggered an investigation that would either vindicate everything I had risked or expose me as a corporate saboteur whose false accusations had damaged legitimate business relationships. More immediately, I had missed my termination meeting with Sandra. My phone was already showing 3 missed calls from Global Tech's main number and 2 voicemails demanding my immediate presence in conference room B. I decided to let them wait. Instead, I drove to a FedEx office and spent the next 2 hours preparing comprehensive documentation packages for Meridian's legal team. Every patent violation report, every email showing deliberate cover-ups, every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past 6 months was organized, indexed, and prepared for overnight delivery to Robert Chen. While I worked, my phone continued buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from Sandra and David. By noon, they had escalated to threatening immediate termination for abandoning my position without authorization, which was ironic given that they had already planned to fire me anyway. The real chaos began around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My phone rang with a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "This is Patricia Williams from Global Tech's executive legal team. We understand you missed a meeting this morning and haven't responded to calls from your supervisors. We need to speak with you immediately about a legal matter." "What kind of legal matter?" I asked. "It's come to our attention that you may have violated confidentiality agreements by discussing proprietary company information with unauthorized parties. We need to meet today to discuss the potential consequences and your options for resolving this situation." The speed of their response was remarkable. Somehow they had already learned about my contact with Meridian and were moving to damage control mode, but their threatening tone suggested panic rather than confidence. "I haven't violated any confidentiality agreements," I said calmly. "I've provided factual information about patent violations to a client who was being defrauded. That's protected whistleblowing activity under federal law." "Ms. Johnson, I think you may be misunderstanding your legal situation here. We strongly recommend that you come in immediately to discuss this matter with counsel present." "I'll consider that advice," I said and hung up. Within an hour, I received a certified letter delivered to my home address threatening legal action for industrial espionage, breach of confidentiality, and tortious interference with business relationships. The letter claimed that I had stolen proprietary information and provided it to competitors with the intent to damage Global Tech's business relationships. But the letter also revealed something crucial: they were terrified. Companies don't threaten immediate legal action against whistleblowers unless they're trying to intimidate them into silence before the truth comes out. Their aggressive response confirmed that everything I had told Meridian was accurate and that they knew it. Late that afternoon, I received a call from Robert Chen with news that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. "Ms. Johnson, our preliminary forensic analysis has confirmed your allegations," he said. "We've identified at least 12 distinct patent violations in the core software platform Global Tech provides to us. Our intellectual property attorneys estimate that Global Tech owes approximately $70 million in retroactive licensing fees for technology they've been using without permission." "Only $70 million?" I asked, surprised by what seemed like a relatively small number given the scope of violations I had documented. "That's just for the patents we verified in the first 4 hours of investigation," Robert clarified. "Our full audit will take several days, but we expect the total liability to be much higher. More importantly, Global Tech's contract with us specifically warrants that all technology will be legally compliant. Their breach of that warranty gives us grounds to terminate the entire relationship and demand full refunds." The implications were staggering. If Meridian terminated their $600 million annual contract and demanded refunds for services based on fraudulent representations, Global Tech would face immediate bankruptcy. They simply didn't have the cash reserves to survive that kind of financial hit. "There's something else you should know," Robert continued. "Jennifer has contacted the CEOs of 3 other major Global Tech clients to inform them about potential patent issues. If those companies conduct their own audits and discover similar problems, Global Tech could face contract terminations worth over $2 billion in annual revenue." I sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of what I had set in motion became clear. In a single morning, I had triggered an investigation that could destroy the company that had tried to destroy me. But I had also potentially saved multiple corporations from being defrauded and protected the intellectual property rights of dozens of smaller companies whose innovations had been stolen. "Mr. Chen, what happens to me now?" I asked. "Global Tech is threatening to sue me for industrial espionage and breach of confidentiality." "Ms. Johnson, let me be very clear about something," Robert said. "Meridian Corporation protects whistleblowers who help us avoid fraud. If Global Tech attempts to retaliate against you for providing us with accurate information about criminal activity, they'll face federal charges for obstruction of justice. We have very expensive lawyers who specialize in protecting people who do the right thing." That evening, as I sat in my apartment reviewing the events of the most intense day of my professional life, I realized that I had crossed a line from which there was no return. I was no longer a Global Tech employee worried about job security and promotion opportunities. I had become the catalyst for the potential destruction of a company engaged in systematic corporate fraud. The question now was whether I had the courage to see this fight through to its conclusion, whatever the personal cost might be. The next 72 hours felt like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. What started as a single phone call to Meridian Corporation had triggered a cascade of investigations that spread through Global Tech's client base like wildfire. Monday morning brought the news I had been expecting, but dreading Global Tech had filed a lawsuit against me for breach of contract, industrial espionage, and intentional interference with business relationships. Their legal team was seeking injunctive relief to prevent me from contacting any of their clients or discussing proprietary information, along with monetary damages for the irreparable harm I had caused to their reputation and business relationships. The irony was that by the time their lawsuit hit the courts, my revelations had already triggered independent investigations by 5 of their largest clients. Meridian's CEO, Jennifer Martinez, had personally contacted her counterparts at other major corporations to warn them about potential patent compliance issues in their Global Tech contracts. The response was immediate and devastating for Global Tech. Pinnacle Financial Services suspended their $80 million annual contract pending a full intellectual property audit. Advanced Manufacturing Solutions terminated their relationship entirely after their legal team discovered 3 clear patent violations in the first day of investigation. Sterling Healthcare Group, their second largest client after Meridian, announced they were conducting an urgent compliance review of all technology services. But the most shocking development came from an unexpected source, Bradley Morrison, Sandra's nephew, who had been given my promised promotion. Bradley called me Tuesday afternoon, his voice shaking with what sounded like genuine fear. "Terry, I need to talk to you about what's happening at Global Tech. Can we meet somewhere private?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the university, far from Global Tech's offices and the chaos that was consuming the company. When Bradley arrived, he looked like he had aged years in the past week. His usual confident demeanor had been replaced by the hollow-eyed appearance of someone who had realized they were in serious trouble. "I need you to know that I never asked for your position," he began without preamble. "Aunt Sandra told me there was an opening in patent compliance and that the company needed someone with fresh perspective. I had no idea they were taking it away from you specifically." "Bradley, why are you telling me this?" I asked, studying his face for signs of deception. "Because they're trying to make me the scapegoat for everything," he said, pulling out his laptop. "Look at this." The screen showed an email from David Walsh instructing Bradley to clean up obsolete files in the patent compliance database to improve system efficiency. The email was dated 3 days after my meeting with David about the patent violations, and it specifically mentioned removing outdated reports that might confuse clients or auditors. "They told me these were just old files that were cluttering up the servers," Bradley continued. "I had no idea I was destroying evidence of patent violations. When the Meridian investigation started, Sandra came to my office and told me that if anyone asked, I should say that file deletion was my own initiative to organize the department better." I stared at the laptop screen, realizing the implications of what Bradley was showing me. "They were setting you up to take the blame for destroying evidence." "Exactly, and there's more." Bradley clicked to another email, this one from Sandra to David. "Look at what they were saying about you." The email thread revealed a calculated plan to discredit me that went far beyond what I had imagined. Sandra and David had been coordinating their strategy for months, documenting fabricated performance issues and building a narrative that I was an unstable employee whose accusations couldn't be trusted. But most damaging to their defense was an email where Sandra explicitly acknowledged that my patent violation reports were accurate, but recommended suppressing them to avoid unnecessary legal expenses during a challenging fiscal quarter. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked Bradley. "Because I'm 22 years old and I don't want to go to prison for corporate fraud," he said bluntly. "My career hasn't even started yet, and they're trying to make me the fall guy for crimes I didn't know I was committing." I've already contacted a lawyer and he says I need to cooperate with whatever investigations are happening. That cooperation proved to be the final nail in Global Tech's coffin. Wednesday brought a conference call that I will remember for the rest of my life. Robert Chen from Meridian had arranged for me to speak with a team that included Jennifer Martinez lawyers from 3 other major Global Tech clients and federal investigators from the Department of Justice who were looking into potential criminal charges. Ms. Johnson, Jennifer began, I want to personally thank you for bringing these patent violations to our attention. Meridian's forensic audit is now complete, and we've identified 27 distinct patent violations with a total liability of approximately $140 million in licensing fees that Global Tech owes to the original patent holders. The number was staggering, but Jennifer wasn't finished. More importantly, we've discovered that Global Tech has been systematically billing us for premium innovative services while providing technology they knew was stolen from other companies. This constitutes wire fraud on a massive scale. Robert Chen provided additional details that made my head spin. The other companies on this call have completed their own audits. The total exposure across all of Global Tech's major clients exceeds $400 million in licensing fees, plus another $2 billion in fraudulent billing for services misrepresented as original technology. One of the federal investigators, Agent Sarah Martinez, addressed me directly. Ms. Johnson, your documentation has been crucial in establishing the pattern of intentional fraud that makes this a criminal matter rather than just a civil dispute. The evidence you provided shows that Global Tech's senior management was aware of patent violations and chose to hide them from clients while continuing to bill for fraudulent services. But the most satisfying moment came when Jennifer Martinez announced Meridian's final decision. Effective immediately, Meridian Corporation is terminating our contract with Global Tech Industries for breach of warranty and fraudulent misrepresentation. We will be demanding full refunds for all services provided since the patent violations began, and will be pursuing additional damages for the time and resources we've wasted on what we now know was stolen technology. The financial impact was immediate and catastrophic for Global Tech. Their stock price had already fallen by 40% since news of the patent investigations became public. The termination of their largest contract triggered a complete collapse, with shares losing another 30% in after-hours trading. By Thursday morning, Global Tech's board of directors had called an emergency meeting to address what financial news outlets were calling one of the largest corporate fraud scandals in Texas tech industry history. The company was facing potential criminal charges, hundreds of millions in civil liability, and the loss of virtually all their major clients. The personal consequences for the people who had tried to destroy me were swift and severe. Sandra Hoffman was terminated immediately and was facing federal charges for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Her pattern of suppressing compliance reports while collecting bonuses for cost management had attracted the attention of the FBI's corporate fraud division. David Walsh was demoted and transferred to a subsidiary company pending the outcome of criminal investigations. His emails acknowledging the patent violations while instructing employees to remain quiet had made him a key figure in the federal case. But the most unexpected development was a phone call I received Friday afternoon from Jennifer Martinez herself. Ms. Johnson, I have a proposition for you, she said. Meridian Corporation is facing a significant challenge. We need to audit all of our technology vendors to ensure we're not being defrauded by other companies the way Global Tech defrauded us. We need someone with your expertise and, frankly, your courage to lead that effort. The job offer was extraordinary: Chief Compliance Officer for Technology Partnerships, with a salary nearly double what I had been making at Global Tech, plus equity options and a signing bonus that would solve my immediate financial problems. There's something else, Jennifer continued. Under federal whistleblower protection laws, you're entitled to a percentage of any money recovered through investigations triggered by your reporting. Based on our preliminary calculations, your share of the global tech settlement could exceed $2 million. As I sat in my car processing this news, I realized that my decision to make that phone call had not only exposed corporate fraud and protected future victims, but had also transformed my own life in ways I could never have imagined. The promotion they had stolen from me seemed insignificant compared to the opportunity I had created by refusing to stay silent. But the most meaningful moment came that evening when I called my mother to tell her about the job offer and the whistleblower settlement. "Mom, we can get you the treatment you need," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I can pay for the specialized care, and you won't have to worry about insurance companies or appeals processes." Her voice was quiet for a long moment before she spoke. "Sweetheart, I'm proud of you for doing the right thing, even when it was scary. Your father would be proud too. You didn't just fight for yourself, you fought for justice." That phone call reminded me that sometimes the most important victories are the ones that let you sleep peacefully at night, knowing that you chose courage over comfort and truth over security. The corporate criminals who had tried to destroy me were facing the consequences of their actions, and the companies that had been defrauded were recovering their losses. But more importantly, I had learned something valuable about my own strength and the power that comes from refusing to be silenced when you know something is wrong. 6 months later, I sat in my new office at Meridian Corporation, looking out at the Austin skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed to symbolize the clarity I had gained through this entire experience. The Chief Compliance Officer's suite was larger than my entire previous apartment, but more importantly, it represented something I had never thought possible, a career built on doing the right thing rather than staying quiet about wrongdoing. The transformation in my personal life had been equally dramatic. My mother was halfway through her specialized diabetes treatment paid for by the whistleblower settlement that had indeed exceeded $2 million. Her doctors were amazed by her progress, and for the first time in months, she sounded genuinely optimistic about her health future. We had moved her to a beautiful assisted living community with an excellent medical support staff, and she spent her days gardening and teaching other residents about nutrition management for chronic conditions. I had purchased a house in one of Austin's established neighborhoods, complete with the home office I had always dreamed of having. But more meaningful than the physical changes was the shift in how I approached my work and my relationships with colleagues. At Meridian, I led a team of 12 compliance specialists who conducted thorough audits of every technology vendor and service provider the company used. Our work had already identified 3 other companies that were engaging in various forms of fraud or misrepresentation, saving Meridian tens of millions of dollars in potential losses and legal exposure. The success of our compliance program had attracted attention from other corporations, and I found myself speaking at conferences about corporate fraud detection and whistleblower protection. The invitations came from companies across multiple industries, all wanting to learn how to identify and prevent the kind of systematic deception that global tech had perpetrated. The personal satisfaction of this work was immense, but it was the relationships I had built with my new colleagues that truly transformed my daily experience. Unlike the atmosphere of fear and competition at Global Tech Meridian, fostered a culture where asking difficult questions was valued and reporting problems was rewarded rather than punished. Marcus Thompson, one of the senior compliance analysts on my team, had become a close friend and trusted collaborator. During our weekly team meetings, he would often reference cases where employees at other companies had discovered fraud, but chosen to stay silent rather than risk their careers. "The difference between us and them," Marcus had observed during one particularly productive meeting, "is that we've created an environment where doing the right thing is actually the safe choice, not the dangerous one. People need to see that integrity can be rewarded before they'll find the courage to practice it." His words had stuck with me because they highlighted something crucial I had learned through this experience. Individual courage is important, but institutional support for that courage is what creates lasting change. I had been forced to act alone against a corrupt system, but now I was helping to build systems that would support and protect future whistleblowers. The legal consequences for the people who had tried to destroy me had been severe and satisfying. Sandra Hoffman had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution for the bonuses she had received through fraudulent cost reduction. Her conviction had led to investigations at her previous employers, revealing a pattern of compliance violations that stretched back over a decade. David Walsh had avoided prison time by cooperating with federal investigators, but his career in technology management was effectively over. The last I heard, he was working as a freelance consultant, struggling to rebuild his reputation in an industry where word travels fast about ethical failures. Bradley Morrison had emerged from the scandal as something of a redemption story. His cooperation with investigators and willingness to acknowledge his role in destroying evidence had earned him consideration for a deferred prosecution agreement. More importantly, he had used the experience as motivation to complete a law degree with a focus on corporate compliance. He now worked for a firm that specialized in helping companies implement ethical business practices. Global Tech itself had survived, but barely. The company had been forced into bankruptcy and restructured under new ownership. Most of their original executive team had been terminated, and they now operated under strict federal oversight to ensure compliance with intellectual property laws. Their workforce had been reduced by more than 60%, and they focused on providing basic technical services rather than the innovative solutions they had previously claimed to offer. The smaller companies whose patents Global Tech had stolen had received substantial settlements that allowed them to fund further research and development. Several of these companies had grown significantly since receiving their settlement money, creating jobs and developing new technologies that were properly protected and licensed. But the most meaningful validation of my decision came from unexpected sources. Over the months following the scandal, I received dozens of emails and letters from Global Tech employees who thanked me for exposing the corruption that had been destroying the company's culture and prospects. Lisa Chen, a software engineer who had been at Global Tech for 8 years, wrote a particularly moving message. I had noticed the patent problems too, but I was too scared to say anything. I thought I was the only one who cared about doing things legally. When you spoke up, it showed me that there were still people willing to fight for what's right, even when it's dangerous. I found a new job at a company with real integrity, and I'm happier than I've been in years. Messages like Lisa's reminded me that my decision had affected far more people than I had realized at the time. By exposing the corruption at Global Tech, I had freed dozens of ethical employees from a toxic environment and given them permission to find workplaces that aligned with their values. The experience had also taught me important lessons about recognizing and responding to institutional corruption. I now understood that when good people stay silent about wrongdoing, they inadvertently become part of the system that enables that wrongdoing to continue. Compliance isn't just about following rules. It's about actively protecting the integrity that makes trust possible in business relationships. Most importantly, I had learned that the skills and knowledge that make someone excellent at their job are often the same qualities that make them dangerous to corrupt systems. My expertise in patent law had made me valuable to Global Tech as long as I was helping them identify profitable violations. But that same expertise had made me a threat when I insisted on actually following the law. The recognition that competence and integrity can make you a target had initially been frightening, but it eventually became empowering. I realized that the very qualities that made me vulnerable to retaliation were also the tools I needed to expose wrongdoing effectively. As I reflected on the entire experience, I understood that my greatest strength had come from my moment of greatest desperation. When traditional channels had failed and institutional processes had been corrupted, I had been forced to find the courage to act independently. That independence had been terrifying, but it had also been liberating. The deep life lesson that emerged from this journey was complex, but powerful. Sometimes standing up for what's right requires risking everything you have, but the alternative, living as a silent participant in corruption, ultimately risks everything you are. Integrity isn't just about following rules, it's about having the courage to act when institutions fail to protect the people they're supposed to serve. I had learned that corruption thrives in environments where good people choose comfort over confrontation and security over truth. But I had also discovered that individual courage, when backed by solid evidence and clear communication, can expose and dismantle even well-established patterns of institutional wrongdoing. The most profound realization was that true security doesn't come from avoiding conflict with corrupt systems, but from building the skills and relationships that allow you to challenge those systems effectively when necessary. The financial stability and professional satisfaction I now enjoyed were direct results of my decision to risk everything for the principle that truth matters more than convenience. Looking back, I understood that the moment I made that phone call to Meridian Corporation, I had transformed from someone who happened to discover corruption into someone who actively fought against it. That transformation had been painful and dangerous, but it had also been the most important professional and personal growth of my life. The woman who had sat in her car that morning, hands shaking as she dialed a number that could destroy her career, was fundamentally different from the woman who now led compliance efforts for a major corporation. The difference wasn't just in circumstances or financial security, but in the deep confidence that comes from knowing you can trust yourself to do the right thing when everything is on the line. As I finished writing my quarterly report on vendor compliance and fraud prevention, I realized that my work now was essentially about helping other people avoid the situation I had faced. By building systems that reward integrity and protect whistleblowers, I was helping to create the kind of workplace I had wished for during those dark weeks at Global Tech. The phone call that had seemed like an act of desperation had turned out to be an act of liberation, not just for me, but for everyone who benefited from the exposure of systematic fraud and the implementation of better protections for ethical employees. My story had become proof that sometimes the most frightening decisions are also the most necessary ones, and that individual courage properly applied really can create positive change that extends far beyond personal circumstances. The question I want to leave you with is this: have you ever found yourself in a situation where you knew something was wrong, but felt too powerless or scared to speak up? What would it take for you to find the courage to act, even when the personal cost seemed overwhelming? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding courage in difficult situations, and share this with someone who might be facing their own moment of truth about whether to stay silent or speak up. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you remember that your voice matters. Your integrity has power, and sometimes the scariest decision is also the one that leads to the most meaningful change. Until next time, keep fighting for what you know is right.